Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Sam's Healing Podcast. I'm joined today by what I like to refer in the recovery world as a real dude. Like Tyler Patrick is just a dude that I know he's genuine. I know he's authentic. He certainly knows what he's talking about. The last time you came in, bro, I had so many, particularly men, but also women say, man, that dude made me feel seen and heard. And so Tyler Patrick is my guest. He is the host of Therapy Brothers, the courageous call-in podcast. So, bro, thank you so much for coming back in.
Hey, Sam, thanks for having me, man. I'm really glad to be back.
I think it's a good thing you live kind of far away. I'm in Texas, you're in Utah. I think we would hang out a lot, probably get in some good trouble. I'd buy you lots of whiskey because I think we related to each other. We're both friends of another dude named Dr. Hedelius, who is a resident genius to all of mankind. But I just appreciate your heart. And everybody that I specifically sent last podcast to was like, dude, spot on. Like that dude read my mail, as they say. And so last time we talked about shame, resilience, and just how so often we create prison cells for ourselves out of shame. As you work with people, as you teach this shame resilience, I mean, do you find it's hard for people to buy into the freedom from shame, that they're worthy of it?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the biggest challenges is the shift that happens because by the time someone gets into our office, Sam, it's like they've been living a lifestyle that has been, I look at it almost like twofold, where there's this underneath part. It's like, bear with me here. This is like the Lion King analogy, but when Simba goes on that little journey in the middle of the jungle and he's like going through the chasing Rafiki, trying to find, he says, I know your father. He finally gets to that pool and looks in, and then he sees his reflection, but then he has this vision of his father. And then the famous line is like, remember who you are, right? I kind of look like recovery is that journey of the truth is already there. The belief system of I am. Who does my higher power say that I am? Who do I say that I am? What are my traits and characteristics that make me me? And then shame comes in over the top as we're being raised, and it puts a callus over the top and says, no, the truth is you're not. You're not this, you're not that, you're not this, you're not that. And so once they start to recognize, wait a second, shame is the driver of all the things that lead to the poor outcomes that I'm getting in my life. Now I have to go back and say, well, what would be the actual truth? And then the battle really begins. I think the messy middle of recovery actually starts once they recognize that shame has been at the driver's seat, and now they've got to put something else there, call it the truth. And the truth doesn't feel true yet. It's like it feels weird to think that I'm good, I'm capable, I'm a warrior, I'm a teacher, I'm a guide. In my own recovery, as I've been like working through this, I feel like I've uncovered like specific words. Yeah, I am. I'm a teacher. I'm a guide. I'm a healer. I'm a lover. I'm a warrior. I'm a friend. I didn't believe any of that stuff at the beginning. And as I started to uncover it, I had to try it on and say, is that really me? And it takes a while to actually come to believe those things sometimes.
Dude, absolutely. I love that. I learned what you're explaining from some people who trained me was you have to learn how to self-validate, right? Because if you can't self-validate, you are spiraling. You have nothing to replace the shame with other than maybe just hope for the best, right? That seems like what you're saying.
That is what I'm saying. And I'm saying like the self-validation to me is, we talk a lot about other words in recovery, things like surrender and acceptance. And what's weird is like we think we have to go out and find something new. And what we really have to do is accept the truth of what was already there. But we have to systematically be willing to go into the dark places to understand who we really are. And that's scary for most of us, to go into the cave where we've been hurt, or maybe we've blown up other people's lives. And now it's the very same place where the treasure lies in terms of our identity and who we actually are.
Do you feel like we all have a cave, all of us, some of us, I have multiple caves,
Yeah.
regrettably. I don't wear it as a badge. I wear it as a joke so that other people feel safe. But I have a few caves. But do you feel like people are really finding it difficult to be self-compassionate? I had a client just recently, like, and I talked about this, say, yeah, encouraging myself, that's awesome. And then have to go Google it or have to Google what is self-compassion. I find that so many people are terrified to be self-compassionate because they think they're being narcissistic or they're enabling themselves or they're living a lie. Do you find that, or how do you help people with self-compassion?
It's that's it's so prevalent to almost reject self-compassion because it feels like I'm letting myself off the hook, or if I don't actually hold
Yes.
myself accountable in like all these big ways, then I'm going to be a worse person and I'm going to keep acting out and messing up. I don't know, remember if we talked about this in our last episode. I don't think we did, but the donut study, did we talk about the donut study?
We did, and you always do this and make me want a big fat chocolate donut. So thanks for that.
Yeah, it's like, but that's just it. It's like we have this like natural built in, we need to criticize ourselves into being better people. And yet the
Yes.
criticism fuels us into being worse people because then we succumb to shame and then we're in that spiral, right?
So
And
true.
what the research actually really does show is that there needs to be accountability for our own choices and our behaviors, and there needs to be self-honesty, but the pathway forward is actually through self-compassion. It's the people who are the most successful in climbing out of their caves and climbing out of the darkness are the people who can self-compassionately go, man, like I did do those things. I betrayed my wife. I blew up my life. I caused a ton of stress for a lot of other people. And but I'm still a good person. Like, and I can understand how and why I got there. I need to go do what I can to fix those things, but I have to accept the truth of who I am still at the core, which is that I'm still good by nature. I'm a
Right.
living, breathing miracle just because I'm alive, you know? And
And
that's, yeah.
for those of us that get into recovery, we're a living, breathing miracle because we should still be doing what we were doing. We should be spiraling into addiction or getting all we can get, just hurting people, going from victim to victim, because we are at our core, apart from, if you come from faith, maybe apart from grace, if you don't come from faith, right? If we're in our shadow side, if we are just acting out, as a great friend of mine and mentor, Rick Reynolds, would say, we are just one big human wrecking ball on legs.
When we're in our addiction. And the crazy thing and sad thing about that, when you look under the hood, is that it's what we're doing in the wrecking ball that we are is we're actually just trying to fill a void. We're trying to somehow lay some kind of balm over the wound of of something that we never quite feel. But we're not
Yes.
doing it intentionally to go ruin everybody's lives. We've been doing it because we don't believe in who we are.
And we're trying to survive. And that's the only way we know. I feel like we're in, for those that maybe do come from faith or grew up in the church, I want to get like a handkerchief and just shout amen while you preach the basics of recovery and the in-depth nature of self-image. And that leads me to what we are going to talk about today. This was just the little shrimp cocktail appetizer of today's podcast, is avoidance. And it's mind-boggling how we can be so avoidant. And I've talked to thousands of betrayed partners, male and female, over the last 20 years who are exhausted, are traumatized, and are frustrated at the avoidance of their unfaithful, who just constantly live in this avoidant world. So I'm going to be funny for a minute, but I'm going to ask you a question because you're an expert at this. Tyler, why are we avoidant? Why are we such avoidant, unfaithful addicts? If we're not an addict, at least in our context of today, we're talking about unfaithful. But why are we so avoidant, Tyler?
I mean, you could probably have your own opinion on this one. I'm going to share from maybe a personal place, but I think it's something that is a theme and a pattern that I see across my practice too. And down at the core, it goes along with what we've been talking about a little bit, is that we have, whatever lives we've lived, we create these skeletons that we have in our closets, and most people have them. We all have them, and then we go into that shameful place of losing the sense of our true identity, and now we believe we're incapable of actually managing or taking care of whatever those skeletons in our closets are. And so what we would rather do is we'd rather spend all of our time and our energy making it look a certain way, running around trying to pretend it's not there, never actually confronting the real issues, trying to like make my wife think I'm an amazing person, or I'm the most spiritual guy at church, or I'm the hardest working man that you've ever seen, or having my friends think that this is terrible, but I was probably the biggest addict in my group of friends, and yet my nickname was the prophet, because it was like, that guy's righteous. Like, he's never masturbated before. He won't even look at porn. Like, all my buddies are just openly looking at porn, and it's right. Like, I'm so pious and so good. And like, I'm avoiding all of that. And really what I'm avoiding is that I don't trust myself. I actually don't trust myself. And because I don't trust myself, that lack of trust spills into other places. And how many times have you heard this, Sam, in your practice, where, we talk about trust one direction, which is the unfaithful partner needs to rebuild trust with the person he's betrayed. But really at the core of this is the unfaithful partner often doesn't trust anybody. He doesn't trust his partner. And it's not because it's, their fault. It's because they've lived a life where they have to be completely independent, so they don't have to be vulnerable, because vulnerability could mean judgment and rejection.
Yes. And, Gabor Mate, I know you know who he is and have read his stuff, but he says that we as trauma survivors, but I say this to unfaithful all the time, whether they're male or female, I say you have two choices. You can choose victimhood or you can choose vulnerability. And vulnerability, looks like, hey, I feel very lost, inadequate. I'm scared. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm terrified, et cetera, et cetera. Victimhood says, well, you always, and you won't, and you can't be happy with me, and it's never enough, and you don't have any grace or appreciation or empathy, and it's always about you. We become and make ourselves victims so that we can somehow survive. Do you think that avoidance is a survival tactic for particularly the unfaithful?
Absolutely. I think it's kind of a false bill of goods, though, because you're putting in all this time and energy to try to protect something, usually protect not being seen in a certain way, or often trying to avoid the pathway forward, which is accountability.
Right.
And so it's really frustrating, because you spend all of this time and energy hoping that you're going to receive the promise of like, okay, now nobody sees what's actually going on, and I still can have a good life, and I can still chase what I'm trying to chase, filling the void with whatever, but it never yields. And then you get burned out, and then you get tired, and then you get resentful. And I would add to what you said that we chase the victim in other ways too. We don't just do it to blame other people to make us the victim, but we do it to ourselves. Like, I'm so blank. I'm not good enough. I'm unworthy. I'm not capable. And so then we try to actually avoid the thing that would actually lead to the freedom. And I'm a big believer in this. Robert Frost, said that the best way out is always through.
Yeah.
And if anybody's listening right now, whatever it is that you're most afraid of confronting in your life, whether it's, a hard conversation with your boss, or whether it's, something going on in your relationship with your partner right now, or there's secrets that you're carrying right now, or there's traumas that you've had in your past, the pathway forward is actually through those things. That's the pathway to freedom. That's the pathway to growth. That's the pathway to like greater insight. And it's so scary because it feels like it could destroy you. And there's a good reason why, is because your past history, you have been hurt through those very same places.
Absolutely.
So it takes courage to step through that.
So you deal with problematic sexual behaviors and addicts, as do I, and I deal with male and female unfaithful and male and female betrayed. But for the addicts, male or female, I've never talked to an addict that eventually got sober, either under the care of myself or somebody else. And I need to ask this a very clear way. Well, I need to describe this a very clear way, and then I'm going to pitch it to you. But when I work with addicts who are eventually clean and sober, who are not acting out anymore, who are not white knuckling it, but they have their own protocol, their own recovery that they're working. Maybe they have a sponsor, what have you. Every time I've asked someone who is sober the question of, hey, when you were acting out, as you look back, do you feel like you were acting out because you were trying to self-soothe and you were trying to avoid? Every single one of them has said, absolutely. I was trying to avoid feelings of X, Y, and Z. Is that what you see in your practice? I mean, you've been doing this a while. You're an expert. You talk to so many men who are addicts and who are struggling with problematic sexual behavior. Is that what you find as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that the avoidance, it's usually maybe in a combination with things where for sure I'm trying to avoid my past failures. I'm trying to avoid the pain that I feel of not being good enough. I'm trying to avoid something else. And oftentimes that gets paired up with also trying to feel avoid. So I'm trying to, and I'm also, this is what's weird, is I'm trying to avoid being rejected. And oftentimes I actually avoid the places that could give me the connection that I so deeply want. And that kind of leads into like whole attachment theory type stuff too, of, the different kinds of attachment. You got that quadrant. You probably talked about this on your podcast before.
Yeah.
But you look at, there's different kinds of avoidance that take place. There's like the fearful avoidant, which is, I know at the core that I need connection and I'm going to cling to you and keep you pulling close, but at the same time, I'm going to push you away. And then, of course, you have that like dismissive avoidant, which is like, nope, stoic. No one's getting in here. I just had a group last night where one of my clients was sharing, we do an assignment called the mask assignment, and they have to kind of peel back the ways that they perform and let the guys in group know who they really are. And he said to me, he told this story about how when he was like 11 years old, his mom, who was a really good mom and caring and compassionate, could see something was going on, and she was getting closer and closer, talking to him, asking him, what's going on in your life? And at this point, he's already got all sorts of secrets and some childhood sexual abuse. And he said, finally, he's like, I felt so good that she wanted to love me, but I couldn't let her see me. And I finally just got in her face and got really intimidated and said, you don't get to know me. You don't get to know me. And that's like dismissive avoidance of, I'm going to keep you shut out, even though I desperately really want you to see me. I can't let you see me.
Okay. I love that. And it's so funny. We didn't even talk about that, but I have in my notes, I wanted to talk about the dismissive avoidant. So for those that are sitting here kind of going, okay, that feels like me. How do we arrive at being a dismissive avoidant? What are some mechanisms that we encounter in life that bring us to a point where we are dismissive avoidant?
If you look at it from like the theory perspective of attachment theory, it actually starts right from childhood, like birth.
Yeah.
And your kind of primary connection to your primary caregivers. And for people who, what an avoidant attachment style learns is, this world will let me down. People will always be there to hurt me. And even though I know that I'm kind of wired for connection and I want that connection, I have to keep people at a distance and only trust myself, which lines itself up really well with an addiction, because that's what we do in addiction too, is just trust myself. I'll fill the void. But it starts at the beginning. So if you have a relationship, say with your, the theory says like, if you're crying and your mother never comes to nurture you, you learn, I'm on my own.
Yeah.
And then you go through life and you have these other kinds of experiences where maybe you have a really rough day at school and then you go home because your parents are both at work, and you go home to an empty house and you're left with nothing to do. And you're like, I'm totally alone. I better figure this out on my own. That's where kind of that sort of belief system of the dismissive attachment, comes in.
It's really, and this is where, for those of you that are watching and listening, if you resonate with the dismissive avoidant term, maybe you've never heard it before, maybe you are kind of gaining some wisdom on it. Its effects on their partner is tragic and traumatizing and hurtful. I want to validate that. But I want to validate the fact of how painful it is to be a dismissive avoidant. Now, we don't let it on because that's what we do. We avoid. And we really kind of put up the mask of, no, dude, it's not, I am, but I'm good. We're fine. But the problem is you described it in such a way that it immediately made my heart feel empathetic for the dismissive avoidant, because it's not like they chose to be. It's not like they woke up one day and were like, it sounds cool. I'm going to avoid my feelings and the feelings of everybody else, and I'm going to dismiss that, and I'm going to get radically uncomfortable when people get emotional, and I'm just going to shut down because that sounds like a lot of fun. It just doesn't go like that. And so I find that the dismissive avoidant have a real difficult time being compassionate on themselves because they don't think they deserve it. Is that what you see?
Absolutely. They don't believe they're worthy of that connection and love. That comes part and parcel with it. And it's so interesting. Back to the story of this guy in group last night. He was talking about the assignments that we give out and that he's working on, and he's just this stoic man, like, rugged individualist kind of a guy, and he's like, I'm only doing this because I made this like goal with my guys in group. Anybody who gets to a certain point in our work, we're going on a backpacking trip together to do this big event in part of the work. And so he's like, the only reason I'm doing this assignment is because I want to go on the backpacking trip. But let me be clear, this assignment is stupid. This is stupid.
Yes,
and
love
then
it.
and then like 2 minutes later, he's like crying, and he's like been cracked open. And the other guys in group are like, oh man, I love this part of you. Like, why don't you show us this more often? He's like, I hate this part of me. Like, no, this is dumb. Like, this is so dumb.
Exactly.
And it's like, what it is it's kind of like it's a tragedy is what it is, because I'm the one, without even knowing that I'm doing it, unless I become aware of these things, is I'm the one who's holding the key to my own prison cell when it comes to connection.
Yeah, so good, bro.
And it's
So
like,
good.
man, I want, what I want is he wanted and he needed the guys in group to be there and say, I see you. I've been there before, me too, but he couldn't ask for the help. And it had to be this like weird breakdown to get into him before. And then he's like, this is dumb. And so now I told him, every time he says this is dumb, we're on the right track. Because it's like,
it's so true, because a dismissive avoidant they'll shame themselves, but then they'll fight tooth and nail. That I've got a guy, I know he's listening right now. I won't say your name, but that I know that are watching and listening to this right now. But he can be such an ass and angry. We call it grumpy old man. But at the core of who he is, the dude is just phenomenal. He will get emotional. He will be empathetic. Yes, he's blown his life up just like I have and just like you have. I mean, he gets it. But he was put through such hell. To me, sometimes I want to say, why would you not be so dismissive avoidant, bro? Think of all you've been through and you've been subjected to, but open up the prison door and let us all in to love you and care for you and stop being a grumpy old man, because your life will absolutely be transformed, right?
Exactly. I think actually at the core of recovery for so many of the people that I work with that fall into this category, their pivotal moments come when they're sitting at church, or they're sitting in a group, or they're with a mentor or something, and then the armor cracks open and the person that they're with sees it and goes all the way in. And it's usually in with like their ugliness. And it's like, I see that and I still love you, and then when they have an emotional experience of, whoa, I'm being vulnerable and I'm not being rejected, like this is new territory. It's almost like scary for them, but it transforms them. They start to go, oh, maybe I'm not a failure. Maybe I am worthy of love. Maybe my deepest, darkest secrets don't have to hold me captive the rest of my life. Maybe I'm human. Like maybe it's okay.
You're absolutely spot on. Now, let me ask you another question. Why, I know from my experience, but you being an expert in this, why are the dismissive avoidant, they come off It's not all of them. I want to say this because the guy that I was just talking about, who's become a great friend and brother, he's not like this. But there's some others that I know that are, and they're probably watching and listening. If they're doing their homework, they're watching this. But why is it so hard for a dismissive avoidant to be authentic? It's like oftentimes many of them will put up this kind of inauthentic front that a lot of us see and go, bro, like this pushes me away from you rather than draws me in. Why do we do that as dismissive avoidance? Why do we seem so inauthentic? It's probably an easy answer, but I want to tee it up for you. Because if we are a dismissive avoidant and we're struggling and we want to be authentic, but we don't know how, it might help, number one, to realize everybody sees, bro, that you're not being really authentic. Number two, how do we help them? And that's a lot. I didn't forewarn you of that big question, but what's your thoughts on that?
No, yeah, I love it, man. So I think that's part of what you probably do with your own group work and your own counseling. I do it with my group work. Is we do this thing with the mask assignment that we do. I have them actually stand up in the room, and then they have their peers come up to them before they even acknowledge anything, and they say, "These are the ways that I think you're hiding." And it's like,
wow,
the avoidant person thinks that it's like playing hide and seek with a 3-year-old where they run behind like a little pole and you can see their whole body, but they can't see because their eyes are covered. And they're like, I'm hidden. I can't see. You can't see me. And then all of a sudden their whole group gets up and like, yeah, you act really tough, but deep inside, you're actually a really nice guy with a heart of gold. And, yeah, you do this thing and you drive the Harley and you act like, you grew out the big beard, but all you really want is a hug, that kind of a thing. And I think down at the core, what it is there's a very tender, wounded part of every single person who has that avoidant attachment. And that the way that they try to protect that tender, wounded part is to let nobody get very close to it.
So true.
So then you're playing like, it's like, then you're playing hide and seek with the 3-year-old. And it's like, all right, we know that there's something underneath there. We can spend as much time up here with the protective parts of you as we need to. But at the end of the day, the goal for both of us is that wounded part needs to be seen and validated and heard and understood.
Because there's a reason. I was in my training, I'll never forget, a dude said to me, he said, listen, anytime you meet somebody who's avoidant, there's a reason they're avoidant. They didn't just decide to be avoidant one day. Is it safe to say, in your experience, the reason they're avoidant is usually trauma? They've been wounded, traumatized, hurt by a parental figure, a caregiver, a family member, someone very close to them, right? So I want to make sure that if you're betrayed and you're listening and watching to this, that we're not making excuses. We are giving understanding, because when you can understand, then you can experience healing. And when healing is there, there's transformation there. But until we understand it, we can't really gain any ground. So is it your experience that you find that trauma's behind this?
Yeah. And I would say it's definitely not an excuse as much as what we're talking about is maybe starting to lay out parts of the roadmap that need to be traveled to get to recovery.
Amen, brother.
That's
right.
So it's like, yeah, I do have some wounds deep inside. I happen to be pretty avoidant because some of my wounds come around performance. If I perform, then people love me. And so I have to pretend like I'm always the best at everything. And then I make friends and then I get opportunities. But if I ever show anything that's weakness or invulnerability like that way, then I run the risk of being rejected. And so that was my growing up. That's what I learned growing up. If I don't do the work to go back and say, hey, I formed that belief as a result of these core experiences, those didn't have to be the truth. They were just experiences. I was a young kid. I didn't know any better. Like I just had my own experience that told me, Tyler, you're not enough, but nobody actually said you're not enough. I interpreted that as a result of what I experienced. So if I'm the one who created that belief system, I'm also the one who could change my belief system. And so I do that by going into those dark places and making different sense of the things that have felt true for my whole life with my experience.
I want to be one of your clients. When you break it down like that, like it feels so safe. It feels so comforting because it's not BS, it's the truth. But until we give somebody that role in our life to be Tyler Patrick, without, I'm sorry, the straightforward truth is you're never going to change, you're never going to heal, because you can't set yourself free if you don't have the help, the modeling, the information. And if you don't have a person with you to teach you that, you just don't set yourself free. I think that's my favorite part of today so far, is just how you broke that down in such a compassionate, explanatory way. So sign me up for a session soon. But now we're moving along, and we're almost done. But I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the fearful avoidant. The fearful avoidant is a little bit different, has some same nuances and themes, but it is equally painful and equally traumatizing to both themselves and their partner or their loved ones. So maybe talk a couple of minutes and set the stage of what a fearful avoidant is.
Yeah, you bet. So the at the core between both fearful and dismissive, you would find kind of similar themes in terms of the underlying work that needs to be done. With a fearful avoidant person, they actually have what's called, it's kind of all called a mixed attachment, which is I actually am going to chase you until you actually turn around and want to see me, and then I'm going to push you away.
Right.
And then it's like, so anyone who's in a relationship with someone who's like got a fearful avoidant attachment style feels like they're always on a roller coaster walking on eggshells. Like, are they going to be close to me today? Are they going to be mad at me today? Are they going to push me away? Are they going to be mad if I leave? If I start, and if I start to leave when they tell me to, then they're going to try to pull me back and start drama with me or something and pull me back into it. And what's really happening is it's a different way of saying, I still need connection and attachment, but I can't be vulnerable with you enough to get that. So I'm going to do it in other kind of, call it manipulative kinds of ways, but then I'm going to push you away the minute you start to get close to me. And so everyone stays just at arm's length, but with your hands on them, gripping them, pulling them in. Yeah. It's a weird kind of an experience.
Do you feel like fearful avoidants are also crying out for closeness, crying out for safety, but they are living in, and every trauma coach or trauma therapist never uses this word lightly, because it is I find it to be a word that describes the core of being a trauma survivor and a childhood sexual abuse survivor. I find that this word just encapsulates what I'm talking about. Is it safe to say that the fearful avoidant experience is a raw terror at the fact that they could be rejected, humiliated, abandoned, just completely raked over the coals? Do you think that's a part of it, or where do you think the fearfulness comes from?
I think you nailed it, Sam, and you've experienced it too. And I would maybe ask you back, like the raw terror. What's the raw terror of? What are you most afraid of?
Oh, I was so afraid of being exposed, humiliated, walked through the streets with a chain around my neck for everybody to hear and see what my absolute darkest secrets of failure, both self-imposed and being violated by other people. I was under the impression, oh man, all you're doing is handing people the opportunity to destroy you. All you're doing with your vulnerability is giving these people the right to absolutely put you on CNN, or Fox News, or all over Instagram of what a complete failure, idiot, horrible person that you are.
Which then means you've got nobody. It means you are totally, completely, and utterly alone. And that to me is what I think most people fear in that raw terror, is there's something, whether it's happened to me or whatever that I've come to believe that is so wrong with me, that if it gets seen and exposed, I will not be connected to anybody.
Yep.
And that's the raw terror. It's right down to the core of that attachment wound of I need to have connection with other people, and now there's something that would compromise my ability to have that. So I've got to either perform my way and pull people in, but never really let me see them, that let them see me, or I've got to keep them just at arm's distance so I get a little sliver of that connection once in a while. So it's like medicine to survive, but it never actually is deep, true connection.
Yeah. Do you think that we also have a knack to sometimes self-sabotage when we start to get close to people?
Yeah. Yeah, man, 100%, right? Like, there's like everybody listening right now, like, yeah, I do that. I do that. Like,
I tried to ask it with a straight face, but we we are such reenactors of our childhood trauma, right? We are just we self-sabotage because it's kind of what we've done. It's what we do. It's how we make sense out of the world, and we're getting very Jungian with this. But at the end of the day, we self-sabotage because we're trying to survive. Would you agree?
yeah. Again, we're trying to survive in a world that we now have come to see as dangerous and something that's trying to kill us by making us feel completely rejected. And so we self-sabotage against the truth of who we are and what our actual real values are and our true identity is. And we sacrifice what would be real connection in the process in order to live in a quote safe or protected space. Because that's why so many people struggle in recovery work, Sam, at least from my perspective, is we can teach them tools and skills about how to get sober, but the people that actually win at recovery, they learn the simple truth that the pathway is through the cave with acts of courage. And and life has to be a courageous thing, and you can't have courage without fear. And so anywhere there's fear in your life, those are the places that inevitably you will have to pass through if you want the freedom that you were designed for. That really is your birthright.
Yeah.
And that's where people have to learn to go.
I think we should start a new podcast. You said this. It frickin' just, I didn't want to interrupt you because it was so funny, but so poignant we should start a podcast that says, "You're trying to kill me," for all avoidance. Because that's what it's like. Yeah. We feel like you're frickin' trying to kill me by pressing on me, making me do work, making me do disclosure, making me go to dumbass therapy sessions and group work. You're trying to kill me. Because it's so damn true for us avoidance. That's what
it feels like. Amen. Right? That's what it feels like.
So
100%.
And so to remind people, you're the host of Therapy Brothers, a courageous call-in podcast. How do people find your podcast? How do people contact you if they want to do work with you, or if they just want to learn more from you? I mean, you have such a grace about your life. How do they get in touch with you? Give them all the details.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, we have the Therapy Brothers is therapybros.com. You can go and see more about us, and you can also sign on to be a caller. If you got some questions, love to talk to you. We also have a website called reclaimyourheart.com, which is where we do really the healing journey from shame and trauma. And then if you're interested, we also have my own private practice, which is lovestrong.com.
It's awesome. Dude, you are a dude. I just am so grateful to know you as a brother and to have you come in and help so many people out there on the internet, help my clients that are looking for more information. So I thoroughly have enjoyed today. I hope you'll come in again soon. Man, I got to get to Utah so that we can go. I'm not going to go on a backpacking trip, dude. I'll sit by a fire with you, but there ain't going to be any backpacking trips. It's going to be on maybe on a 450 motocross bike. I'll go with you and we'll do that. But in terms of hiking, sorry, bro. I'm just going to sit by a warm fire. Let me know when you come back. But Tyler, I'm so grateful, bro. So thank you for coming in. For those of you that are watching and listening, man, go follow and subscribe to his podcast. Also hit the subscribe button to me. Leave a comment here. And thank you again for joining us. And we'll see you again soon.